Good morning, boys and girls, and welcome back to the eastern wing of the Stinkbug Works. I have one side on here. I have yet to remove the tape. Let me tell you what I discovered. When you're putting tape on to hold things down, you kind of I started here in the middle and worked my way to this end and then worked my way up here and did this. But as I'm putting it down, I can see pulling this one down starts pulling the next one down and pulling the next one down. When you get to the end, you can see that this one isn't pulled down nearly as much as that one. So I start going over it again. This has several layers of tape, and each time I put one down and I wrap it around and I pull on it real tight and put it down, the next one loosens up, and I keep going up, and I've gone up and down this thing several times to where I'm pretty sure I have a good joint. Now, last night, before I shut down the shop here, I ran a bead of epoxy along this lower chine, and I'm half tempted to do the same thing. Up in this area, it's pretty well established. It's glued down here. But along here, because what I did, let's go back to what I did. I took my piece, where I have another piece wrapped on that tube right now. I took my piece off, and I painted it on the inside with epoxy, and I just brushed on the epoxy. I didn't do the wipe-off trick. So I just brushed on the epoxy as thin as I could brush it on, let that cook off, and then I brushed on another layer and attached it to the hull structure here. So I should have good glue along here, although I'm not certain. I know I have good glue along this lower chine here. So maybe I'll pull the glue off, and if I don't have a good bond along here, I always have more tape. You know what? This 2-inch wide tape is the ticket. I did some thinking about the interiors, and here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to have the passenger compartment kind of come in, and just like the motor hooks on this little tab, I'm going to have this little box that I make come in, and it'll index on something up by this bulkhead. And the back end will just sit on these stringers and this bulkhead, and it'll, of course, be notched out for all the drive gear. Then I'll just simply have a pin that goes through here and holds the whole thing in. Bingo, done. And of course, the bottom section will be taped down. I actually got from Aircraft Spruce some little tiny Zeus fasteners, and these are small enough that I could use on a boat, but they just don't look scale enough. You know, I'm putting in this. Oh, yeah, here. I've assembled the engine. I didn't paint this part of the bell housing very well, but that's just the way it is. What I'm going to do is I'm going to epoxy like a 3mm bolt right in here, and so it'll be sticking out here. And then this is going to go in a little sub box that goes on this rear deck. And so this bolt will hold this end of the motor in. And remember yesterday I talked about these motor mounts, and I'll build some rails in there. So when you look in there, you'll see the engine sitting on some rails, and you won't see where this bell housing goes because it actually goes to a V drive up here. But I don't have a V drive. I have a G drive. So, some little cool scale details. For example, here on the intake manifold where they would have machined this area, because there's a hold down for a clamp that clamps, in this case it's going to be a magneto. So it clamps your magneto, so they would have ground that off. And like your thermostat housing here, it's just a slightly different color of silver because it was made in a different place. And this is supposed to be sand to cast kind of finish. Although it came out looking more like magnesium, but you know what? I have a magnesium tunnel ram. And so what I'm thinking about the exhaust headers, they're going to be pretty delicate. And this thing's going to be bouncing around. And if I were to just glue them to these small little ports here, I'd have to scrape off all the paint here and scrape off all the paint on the headers and use epoxy. I had some leftover epoxy, so I epoxied all these parts together. This is almost ready to get its wash, and then I have to build all the front belts and timing and fans and such. But this is about ready for a wash. And then I got to do the carburetors. The carburetors are going to be a chore. And I really should put some linkage on them. But here's the problem with the carburetors. They're buried in one of these boxes, so you're just going to have to take my word. They're Holley double pumpers. And a Holley double pumper is longer than it is wide. Well, in order for those to fit on here, they have to fit sideways. Now, the average Joe Blow wouldn't pick that up, but a Holley double pumper should be facing the same direction because you have your primary and your secondaries, and the primaries have the little choke thing on top of it, but there is no choke. So I guess it doesn't really matter if you put the carbs in sideways. Then getting the throttle linkage to work, because you'd have to have two separate linkages, whereas if they're in a line, one linkage could work both carburetors. There's another guy that makes 12-scale 3D printed carburetors, and maybe they're more like the Carter carburetors. Chevys ran Carters and Ford ran Holleys anyway, So putting Holley carburetors on a small block Chevy might be sacrilege to some. So the Carter AFB, we used to call that awful effing big. But the Holleys, the double pumpers, were even bigger than that. So there you are, boys and girls. Next time you see this, so my plan for today, I don't have to go anywhere or I do have to do something. I do have to prepare up a proposal, but I'll just modify an old one that I gave the same guy. So I'm just going to change the names and dates and assessor parcel numbers. So that'll be good to go. And then I can work on this. There'll be breaks where I'm letting epoxy or paint cure. I'll put a wash on that. Maybe I'll start working on the front drive. There you go, boys and girls. Until next time, jet out. Welcome back, boys and girls. In reviewing my video, I have to check them now to make sure they don't go into slow motion mode that just screws up everything. It's a feature of iPhones. Anyway, I was talking about how I was going to mount these exhaust headers. Actually, it's going to go that way. How I'm going to mount these exhaust headers so that they don't break off. Because let's be realistic, folks, here, they're a snug fit in here. And in fact, I'm just now discovering the spark plugs are right in the way, just like they are in the full-size thing. Anyway, I think I can get around them. But here's the deal. In order to get these headers on where they can withstand the rigors of bouncing around in a boat, I think I'm going to do this. I'm going to take a very small little drill bit, and I'm going to drill right smack dab in the middle of there, about that deep, which is maybe 3 or 4 millimeters deep. And 3 or 4 millimeters deep. And because this lines up so well with that, I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to drill, actually here I can drill that deep. These things are probably hollow on the inside, just like this bell housing was. But I can drill right here in this exhaust port, and right here in this exhaust port. I can put a little carbon fiber pin, which would probably supply just enough that I can put these headers on. Now I'm going to use epoxy because I think that's better than CA. But what do you think? Put these headers on with a couple of little pins in there. That's one reason I chose this particular engine as opposed to others, is that the headers that came with it can flip around and be just like a boat's headers, because that's what the guys at the small block Chevys did. They took these headers, which went underneath the car, and they just flipped them over. Bingo. There they go. So that's going to be how I deal with the headers. Painting the headers is going to be a challenge. And I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to first paint them with this gloss black as an underbase. Or do I have a spastic that's a underbase? Anyway, you paint the headers gloss black, and then you shoot them with this Spastics mirror chrome. This stuff looks pretty chromy. And then I'm going to come in with some candy blue, some candy yellow, and some candy red. And I'm going to do, the heat staining, the color staining, to where it goes from bluish to kind of purplish, and, right here at the bends, right where it comes out, and right here at the bends. So we're going to be doing some airbrushing, real light airbrushing, to where almost no paint at all comes out the gun. But we're going to do these up as chrome headers with heat treating on them. So that's going to be my plan there. Okay, now, for real, jet out.